In the early part of this immediately past decade, after the Serbian revolt in 2000, George Soros, it seems to me, began funding what amounted to summer camps in the Balkans with Otpor people from the old B92 radio station in Belgrade, sort of summer camps for teaching nonviolent revolution. Do you have any idea how much that had to do with spreading these ideas among the revolutionaries of the Arab Spring?
No. I know nothing about those camps. Our attempts to get funding from George Soros have resulted in zilch. We even get pro forma crude letters from his assistants, not crude, but pro forma automatic letters already printed out, rejecting our applications. He's probably a very well-intended person, and he probably does very good work. I don't know much about it, and he doesn't express any interest in what we've been doing.
Gene, you're in a slightly interesting position in that you advocate self-liberation, that governments really shouldn't intervene in the internal politics of countries. But do you think that Western democracies should assist in democracy groups in pushing non-violent struggle tactics, your tactics, in countries like Iran?
I think it depends on what they're competent to do and what their judgment is as to what needs to be done and if they're able to do it. Mostly I don't trust them because they don't know what the hell this is. They don't really understand it. So if they give advice, they will often try to push their own decision as to what needs to be done, as was done in Zimbabwe, for example. Outsiders trying to give advice and instructions to the Zimbabweans how to struggle. And the advice was always wrong, according to a colleague of mine who knew a lot about what was going on. So it's far best if you have an issue there. And don't take CIA money, if it's available. Don't take CIA controls. I know one Iranian I met years ago who said, we had CIA money for our youth group and so forth and so on. And boom, the policy changed and the money was cut off and our group was less starving. You know, because they couldn't carry through because their policy changed. It was directed from outside. Don't trust that. It wasn't Parnell, maybe it was Parnell in Ireland, who said to the Irish peasants who were struggling against British landlordism, rely on yourselves alone. This was Gandhi's message too. Don't depend on someone else coming to save you. They may not ever get there, and they may come with shackles as well.
Yes.
Hi, my name's Tim G. We've exchanged some emails about a book that I wrote which was inspired by your ideas, Counterpower. I've been talking about these ideas around the country, and two questions keep coming back. The first one is, how do we stop the movement from becoming, if the movement wins, then, and if the movement takes power, how do we stop them from being as authoritarian as those ones before? And the second one that keeps coming back is, how can those of us for many of us our primary struggle is against the dictatorship of corporate power, and how can these ideas be translated into something which is a little bit more complex, and which has a kind of which seems quasi-democratic because there are elections every so often.
Both questions are very good, and I can't do it in 3 seconds. And I don't know the answers to most of them. In the final chapter or two of the Politics of Nonviolent Action, there's a warning about this stage. You brought down one regime. How do you not get the new Bolshevik regime or the new Ayatollah regime stepping in and taking charge? It's very important. There are some suggestions there, very generic suggestions. Also, one way this happened is in the midst of confusion, some group seizes control of the state apparatus, a coup d'etat. To my knowledge, we're the only organization that has a handbook on how to prevent and defeat a coup d'etat if it's attempted. It's called the anti-coup. There are copies on our website for download. We have copies for sale at our office. And it is now in what languages? French and what? Louder. All right, there's a start. It needs to be in the languages of Africa, where coup d'etat has been the plight to preventing the development of civilian democratic governments for decades now. Coup d'etats often engineered with foreign intelligence agencies, like the American CIA involvement in Chile, ousting a democratic government when setting up Pinochet's regime. You have to know how to, it's a serious defense problem, which you should get all kinds of people of different political persuasions, as well as our Democrats, to support and conduct. How do you change the corporate system? I haven't got a solution to that. There have been important and good groups working almost for a century, certainly for many decades, how you do the various versions of socialism, whether it's guild socialism, libertarians kind of socialism, state socialism, democratic socialism, and on down. And the answers don't seem to be very perfect. It seems there's some problem of bureaucratic control, which is a big problem. Major work is needs to be done on that. I haven't done it. Maybe you and others and people you know and work with can get a good start on that, and I would encourage that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's just run.
Hello, Gene. I've worked with 7 human rights groups, and I've actually written a 1,700-page book with Hitler at the middle of it, and also did the affidavits for Vanunu. And when I was in university, we had Walden Pond around the corner. Mm-hmm. The world has moved on since then, and the people who consolidate power are much more wicked and better organized than they were in those days. Mm-hmm. And I wonder what the role of the individual and of nonviolence really is in this. I mean, there was a plot against Hitler in early 1930s, mm-hmm. a bomb under the stage. If it had killed Hitler, that was one individual against an individual. How do you feel about nonviolence after doing this all your life? I mean, do you feel absolutely committed to it? Should the Syrians go on dying by the tens of thousands if Assad managed to stay in power? Is collective action always the way to do it, do you think?
I don't think there's any action that's not corporate action, not group action, that can get rid of dictators. Individuals cannot get rid of dictators. Just being good or committed is not enough. You have to work with other people. You have to get rid of the sources of power. Those sources of power are not made available purely by individuals, but by groups of people and by institutions. So maybe it's not the answer an individual's approach to moral nonviolence likes to hear, but that's my opinion.
Well, I was actually thinking about nuclear weapons. I mean, Mordecai Vanunu spent 18 years in prison for revealing the Israeli atomic bomb project. Mm-hmm. I've worked all my life on nuclear weapons issues, and we've never been able to make any progress against this thing. Fukushima didn't really bring it to an end in Japan. How confident are you that collective action will always triumph?
It won't. I don't let you focus on confronting. The approaches of various groups think you can get rid of war and the war system by confronting it, by demonstrating it, by having massive rallies and campaigns. I don't think you get rid of war by confronting it and opposing it. You get rid of war by having something else that's credible that people can do instead. I was on the first All-American March. I know about that kind of thing, maybe not as much as you do, probably. But I know that can happen, that somebody, you feel good about it. But feeling good does not change things. You get rid of weapons by not needing them anymore. They're superseded by some new way of conducting the struggle instead. You're not being naive about the dangers of this or that regime. You're not saying let's all just be good or just witness, which is a good word in many ways, but a very insufficient word. You have to build a substitute. I have chapters on that in my book, Social Power and Political Freedom, along with a number of other chapters that might be of interest.
Gene, just on that Syria point, at the moment we're beginning to see a non-violent struggle taking place alongside elements which seem to be armed. Do you think a mixed approach can work, a non-violent struggle alongside an armed struggle?
This is a popular view. I've heard that for a long time. You're thinking you have so much here that's positive and so much here is positive, so let's put it together. Very naive. The way violent struggle works and operates and produces its result, and the way nonviolent struggle operates and produces its results are opposite. So what is, if you had the violent people helped by the nonviolent people, and say, in addition to that, we're going to have some other people go on hunger strike in the middle of a war on the Western Front, or we're going to have people refuse to use guns on the middle of the war. That's not going to help the war. But similarly, violence in the midst of a nonviolent struggle is a tool of the oppressor to trick the people into accepting violence, because that is what the regime wants them to use, because it is competent and equipped and prepared to use the regime's violence, that overwhelmingly much greater than anything the rebels could choose. It's mobilized to it together. And that regime violence, often perpetrated by agents within their political police, that will help the regime maintain control and defeat the opposition.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Gene. It's been wonderful. I'm a photojournalist, and I specialize and work very much about women and children and humanitarian issues and so on. And one of the things that's really struck me these last 3 or 4 weeks, particularly what's happening in Libya today, and I'd be very interested in your view behind just what you just recently just said, which is basically you have regimes that want to perpetuate and the fear and so on. And then you hear what's happening in Libya today, and I have friends and colleagues that are working there, and you have got the revolutionaries that are actually miming exactly what Gaddafi had done, creating the most extreme kind of terror, and miming exactly what he had done in terms of creating fear, of cutting off fingers, of interrogations where you have Médecins Sans Frontières that's actually abandoned. They said, we don't want to have people being brought in that are being asked by us to help them get their health back so they can go back for the interrogations. So for me, I find that what's really curious, and I would really be interested in your view, is you've got these revolutionaries that are actually perpetuating the kind of fear and agony that the regimes were perpetuating for years. Why are they still doing it? Is it tribal? Is it something inside of this insidious behavior? And how can we, outsiders in the West and everywhere else, have any respect for that?
You know much more about Libya than I do by far.
No.
I don't know much about Libya. Libya was not a case of a nonviolent people power revolution. It started off nonviolently and quickly became military. How? Because a Libyan general of the Gaddafi regime defected. He went to the rebels, here I am, I defect. Here are my soldiers, and here are my guns. We're here to help. Within about a few weeks after that, he's in rebel headquarters. He's killed. 2 weeks before he defected, Gaddafi and his son predicted this struggle will end in a civil war. My hypothesis, and it's a hypothesis, is this was a high-level agent provocateur planted specifically to get the rebel movement to shift to a violent struggle. The Gaddafi regime, with their superior military capacity, was confident they could control. The rebels found that even with that soldier and his guns and his weapons, they was inadequate. So they didn't get the French at first, and the United States assistance, and NATO's assistance, and even then it took months. When Libya and Tunisia were a matter of weeks. The assumption that violence is going to be quick, nonsense. The assumption that violence is a tool of liberation, nonsense. As the Libyan struggle was ending up, there were Americans talking about what, the Americans talking about what, now what should we have Libya be?